bostoneveningtherapy.com, or your followers can email me directly at Aaron, Aaron, at bostoneveningtherapy.com.
Perfect. So, Aaron, I guess my first question to you is, how did you get involved in this type of work and why?
Um, well, I think I got involved in this type of work because, I was doing a bunch of other things earlier in my life, regular jobs and regular kind of career paths, and they were good, but they felt very indirect. They felt like some days I would come home and not know really what or why I had done what I did. And so I kind of wanted to be in a field where I could feel that every day I was making some kind of a tangible difference, that every day, albeit some days more successful than others, that I was having real contact and impact on a person that I was working with, and just trying to something satisfying that would be doing good in the world. And that got me into social work and psychotherapy and counseling, and the whole panoply of health, mental health and emotional health and well-being and physical health and relational health and all kinds of things like that. And it's been a fun journey.
When it comes to well-being, I know sometimes, not sometimes, I know that can mean different things to different people, and it can look like many different things to a number of people. When it comes to well-being in general, what do you see are some of the obstacles that people are facing when it comes to understanding what they need in the journey of well-being?
Um, I think, I think sometimes I like to think of it as well-being is less an act of building up things and more of a clearing away. It's sort of maybe an analogy could be gardening or clearing a field where, yes, you certainly need to plant things, but a lot of the time is spent sort of clearing the land and sort of creating space for what's already there to blossom and to grow. And I think we get in our own ways a tremendous amount with negative thinking, with recurring negative and illogical thought patterns, um, and putting limits on ourselves for various reasons. And I think underneath all that is a healthy individual. And often it's a process of kind of letting go of things that are not serving us, identifying them first, identifying what is really not serving us, even though we sort of do it by default or by habit, um, and maybe assume that since we've done it for so long, it must be okay, at least. But very often it's quite destructive. And so I think I sometimes would like to help people identify those patterns, um, which can take some doing, and then take some doing to kind of help people along to recognize that maybe I need to make a change. Change is hard for people, even when they see that it's for the good. It's still hard, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
When I look at change for some people, and this is going to be from my experience working with some of the women that I work with from a coaching perspective, is that their nervous system, their body, their mind, their lives are so comfortable one way, no matter how chaotic it's been, because their body has adapted to it. You show them on the right hand side, said, hey, terrain says you can have a more fulfilling life. You can achieve optimal well being, but you may have to step away from the people around you. You may have to change certain things. They look at us like, oh my God, I don't know how my body's going to show up, because they may feel anxiety. They may feel nervous. They may be unsure. They may ask themselves, am I worthy of that
Mhm.
type of change. When it comes to self-worth, what role do you think that plays in maybe hindering some of the success that people can achieve?
Yeah, I think it's an enormous component to it. Self-worth. I think maybe the way I like to think about it is maybe a shortcut to improving self-worth. Maybe the shortcut's not the right word, but a different way of thinking about it is letting go of comparison with others. Um, because very often a diminished self-worth is part of seeing ourselves as less than compared to others or compared to specific others. They have this, they have achieved that, they look this way, they have these skills that I don't, and all of that kind of adds up to low self-worth. And and I think letting go of that comparison game is is a great first step to improving self-esteem. I think it's important to recognize too that it's a negative thing to do even when we're on the plus side of that. You know, I'm better than this person, I have more money than that person, I am more accomplished than this person. That seems like it feels better, but it's really two sides of the same coin. It's a losing proposition because you're not actually seeing yourself positively. You're just seeing yourself for the moment, you know, in a superior position to somebody else. Um, that those circumstances can and do change, but your self-worth should be much more independent of that. So I think the comparison game is a really losing venture, no matter what. And I think it unburdening ourselves of that um, is a real opening to feel better about yourself too. I think.
Some of the things that I've done to increase how I viewed myself, therefore increasing my self-worth, is I practice it every day. So it could be, let's say, affirmations, not to the point where they're toxic positivity, which exists, right? You know, saying that I'm the greatest gift to mankind, right? Somewhere in between. I may be halfway there, but I'm not all the way there. Or saying that I'm the best thing that's ever happened to my family. Like you want something that's going to build you up, but not something that maybe is too extreme where, to your point, you may develop arrogance or you think you're better than some people. When it comes to daily rituals, what are some of the things that you share with people that maybe they would want to start doing so they could benefit from it?
Yeah, well, it's something that you said got my attention there. Of, I'm the best thing that happened to has for my family. Um, um, you know, I think one thing that can really help is is spending some time to really identify our values and our um, purpose, direction, things that we can feel have true intrinsic value. Um, and they can be small things. They don't have to be big things. But, you know, identifying, I guess what I'm saying is, what are the components of a good life for an individual? What are the values that you want to pursue? What are the ways that you want to interact with the world and with others and with yourself, of course? And, you know, seeing if you can do things to move that forward every day. And you know, sometimes I think of this as being very small things too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, one example, like just getting a cup of coffee from somebody in the morning that you're buying, or you know, there's a moment there where you're exchanging this item, and at that in that moment, you can choose to see that individual as a human being of worth and of value and worthy of your attention and consideration, or you can just see them as, just the happens to be the person or handing you this coffee. And sometimes, and sort of taking a second to sort of give some sanctity to that exchange, uh, can can feel good and can feel like a good thing that you can actually be proud of that day. Sounds like really innocuous, sounds really small, but things like that, and I'm sure people could come up with a million different examples of that. And not only to other people, but towards yourself too. Can you be, can I be more compassionate with myself when I screw something up, when I make a mistake, when I forget something, when I'm kind of lazy, you know, or, when I need to rest, um, and don't get as much done as I thought I should or wanted to? Can I be gentle with myself in that moment instead of, brutal, And I think doing that is a way of stating that I have value, and taking care of myself and being kind to myself is important. Uh, and so that's what I mean. I think identifying your values, identifying things that have intrinsic value, and trying to do them. And if you do a couple of those things, you can call it a successful day. You know, successful days don't have to be as, they're not about, landing a big new account, getting a promotion, getting a raise, getting a big score, um, uh, falling in love. These are all headline things that happen, and they're great. It's wonderful. But most of life is much more mundane, And so we have to be happy in the mundanity, probably not a word, but we have to be happy in that realm, because that's where we live most of our life.
You mentioned earlier, Aaron, comparison.
Yeah,
And sometimes in a lot of ways that is something that steals joy
for sure.
from us, right? I have a 2027 Mazda. My neighbor has 2027 Lexus. So I go out there, I have a 2027 Ferrari. Neighbor down the street has the same year, but they have a Lambo. It's always this competition. We're not speaking it, right? I'm not going to Aaron, hey, what car you think of getting so I could one up you? I'm watching you. I'm planning. I'm saying, okay, I see what Aaron is doing. Does that play a role in people struggling to achieve the ability not to be hard on themselves because they see competition everywhere, every day?
Yeah, definitely. It does. Again, I think of that as being something to clear away, sort of like clearing the garden again, back to that image. Those are weeds, those are weeds that are growing up around the garden, and we have to tend to that. Weeds are natural. Again, it's not something to, we don't want to double down on that and beat ourselves up for having those feelings. Those are human feelings. We are, um, there is room, there is place in a healthy life for competitiveness and competition. So, why these things are a little subtle and a little um, complicated, because it's not like you need to expunge everything from your personality and mind that is competitive. But uh, what is the proper role of competition, and where is it really unhealthy? And I think that would be a great example of unhealthy. It's just it's sucking up your energy, it's sucking up your mental capacity, and it's not worth it. We get one shot at this deal, and I think that's where we want to, we get one shot at this life, and there's a million ways that we could expend our energy. And so it does become important that we spend some time really thinking about, you know, where do I want to spend most of my energy? That can change, over time. We can readjust and make changes in that. But I think what happens with if we don't make those decisions, then those decisions will sort of be made for us. They'll be made for us by TV. They'll be made for us by social media. They'll be made for us by, neighbors or friends, or, just they'll be foisted upon us by entities or individuals that have an ulterior motive. The people at Lambo, Lamborghini wants you to feel that way, because that's how they sell Lamborghinis. Who else is going to buy a Lamborghini if not to show off a little bit, right? So that's what they want you to think. And do you want to think like they want you to think, or do you want to think like you want to think?
Yeah, no one's going to buy a car just to put it in the garage and never have it hit the road.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Sure, for sure. Yeah.
When it comes to psychotherapy, can you explain what that is and what are some of the benefits for people who will use that type of therapy?
Hmm. Yeah. I first would say that psychotherapy is a tool, and it's something that can be a very helpful tool. Sometimes I don't feel that it is certainly not the only tool, um, and it's not necessary to be for well-being. However, it can be, uh, when done properly, and when the relationship between client and therapist is good, it can be a tremendously valuable tool and very effective. I think that the best way to describe it, just very simply, is that um, when done well, it is an opportunity for a person to have a specific place, uh, to speak with a smart, caring, highly invested person, uh, who is dedicated to hearing your whole story in a non-judgmental way. And a lot of the value of therapy really doesn't necessarily even come from the therapist. I mean, a lot of the value of therapy is sort of a little bit of magic, in the sense that I think most of us have had the experience of just walking through life, and just saying, that person just does not understand. They do not understand what I'm talking about. And, they have no idea who I am. They have no idea what I'm trying to say. They have no idea what I just said to them. And that's a very, that's a difficult feeling. I think the magic of therapy can be, when the person feels truly and completely heard their story and understood. It's fairly rare, when you think about it, that we have conversations, even with close friends, in which we feel like we're being truly listened to and truly heard. And any questions are not questions that are like, maybe you should have done this, or you know what I did before that helped. What happened to me. They're questions that are only trying to clarify your story, you know, so that you can feel heard and understood. And that's, I think, uh, pretty rare. Normally we're talking to somebody and they have their own agenda. They're listening, but they're really thinking about how they're going to respond when they have a chance to talk. They're thinking about what you're saying reminds them of something that happened to them and that they want to tell you about next as soon as you stop talking. Um, which is fine for conversation, but for trying to go for something transformative and that's really about you, I think that's where psychotherapy can be really.
And I agree. And one thing I'll add is there's so many things going on in the world at the same time that it could be difficult for us to think that we can resolve it all on our own. Right. And sometimes I think some people, at least some of the ones I spoke to, when you mention mental health or you mention well-being or you mention therapy, they get guarded at the word because from what I've been told, some people view it as a weakness. I'm strong. I don't need therapy. I don't need a coach. I don't need to speak to someone. Or, oh, that's demon talk and all this other things, right? When it comes to some of the myths and the misconceptions of therapy, what would you like to say about them for those who may think that only weak people get therapy and being vulnerable in that way is not a sign of strength?
Yeah. Um, right. Well, people can feel that only weak people do it, and they can also feel like, oh my God, I mean, I have problems, but I'm not crazy, and I don't, I'm not that bad that I need to do that, to go to therapy. Um, I think what I would say is that I would I would kind of set those um, sort of stereotypes aside, and I would say, um, am I a person that wants to share my story and feel like I'm being heard and understood, and and work through some frustrations and difficulties and challenges that I have with somebody that's really going to get it and not be judgmental. Um, if that is something that, and do I already have that in my life? And if the answer is no, which very often it is, um, then it might be worth considering, and doing. Um, it's really not really anything more than that. It's can this be a useful tool? Um, um, I think a lot of these preconceived notions are artificial barriers to things that we put up that is too bad because they could be helpful. They might be helpful. Um, yeah. I mean, I think we do that with many things, not just therapy. Um, I'm sure there's a number of things that we also do that with. That's not for me, or I know what that. I've never done that, but I know exactly what that is and exactly who that's for, and exactly who's worth doing that and who's not, and that's not me. But I think another thing is, be open to learn new things. I think that's another way to stay healthy, is to remain curious about life, remain curious. We really don't know everything. We really don't. There's a lot more that we don't know, all of us, than that we do. And so um, maybe be curious about therapy. Like, I know I think this way about it, but is that really the way it is? Or do you really have to be crazy to do that? Or is it possible that it's something different?
I look at my experiences and I'm grateful for the mentors and the coaches and the therapists that's come into my life, either directly, indirectly. Many that I've spoke to about some of the things I've gone through, some of them I haven't, but the resource and the listening ear was always there. And one thing that I really did appreciate is I didn't at any point think that it was a sign of weakness. On the contrary, I thought it was a sign of strength because I'm telling myself, not only do I want to become better and do better and live better, I'm actually taking the steps. We've been on this earth long enough. There's a lot of people who've told us a lot of things that they never follow up with. It's just sugar to our ears and sour to our souls. It's just talking to talk. And I share that because there's one person who I used to communicate on social media with a little bit, and she thought therapy was and coaching. She's like, nope, I'm not going to be vulnerable because vulnerable is a weakness, and I want everyone to view me as strong. And she suffered quite a bit because her ignoring of what she was going through started to show up in her body. So her hands started to tingle a little bit, her legs started to be pain, and it reached the point where she lost mobility and she struggles. And I tell people that you don't know how anxiety, trauma, depression, stress will show up in your body because we all exhibit different signs of it and it impacts us differently. What are some of the ways that you've seen people be impacted, maybe physically in their body, when it comes to some of the trauma, anxiety, or just the things they go through in life from your experiences?
Yeah, um, certainly trauma and anxiety and depression can all cause us, I think, to close down and close up. And I guess the image that's coming to mind is sort of like to be hunched over, physically kind of closed and hunched over, sort of balled up in a what is perceived to be a protective stance, to kind of, if we get into that mindset that we're going to get knocked down and hit the ground, we want to kind of be in a kind of tuck and roll position. And I think that people often physically take on that stance. Um, uh, and don't trust their body. Um, so and it's a good point. I mean, I do think that physical movement and activity is an enormous factor in well-being, exercise. Um, and I encourage anyone I'm working with that is suffering to have some form of physical activity, particularly in outside, if possible. The most accessible one, of course, is a walk. A walk in the sunshine, um, preferably without kind of stimulation like earbuds or some such, but not necessarily. But sort of just the idea of being in movement, to be connecting with your physical body, connecting with the physical natural world, paying attention to your breathing, feeling your heart rate. Um, I think all of these things can be very empowering and they're healthy for one thing. So I think that a person that is very depressed, for example, that's one thing that I'm a big believer in is just sort of having some degree of satisfaction, some degree of knowing that I did something well, something worth doing today. And taking a walk can be one of those things. Taking a walk is a good thing. It's a good thing. And so at the end of the day, if you do nothing else and you're very depressed, if you do nothing else, you still have the satisfaction that you took a walk. You got some sunshine. Um, and that is good. That is a good thing. Now, what you want to do is to try to push back against all of the negative mind chatter that sometimes can accompany that, right? Like, oh, you took a walk. Good for you. You're a superhero. Wow. You changed the world. So and so down the street bought a Lamborghini while you were taking a walk. What's wrong with you? What do you think? Um, you want to, we need to push back against that chatter, you know? So yeah, I think that's a physical activity is huge. I'm a huge believer in that for myself and for my clients and for anybody that I work with. Now we understand, people have limitations, right? I mean, so we want to, but whatever those limitations are, we can work within that, and it's good enough. What you can do is what you can do, and if you do what you can do, you did it, man. That's good. Good job. Yeah.
How important is it then, Aaron, to quiet that inner voice that is more negative than positive and listen to things that are more positively beneficial to us?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, there's a whole line of psychotherapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, which specifically identifies negative thought patterns and tends to kind of put them into categories, like things that we do, overgeneralization, overgeneralizing things, all or nothing thinking, you know, he's a winner, I'm a loser, Um, so think and a number of other categories that are just like illogical. But we think they're logical because we have them a lot. Um, and I think the first step, setting aside positive or negative thoughts, the first step is kind of working with thoughts and thinking in general. That a thought is just a thought. A thought is just something that pops up. We don't have to pay attention to it. We don't have to give it importance. We don't have to act on it or kind of engage with it deeply. Um, we just think that because this thought popped up, it has value, it has meaning, it has importance. No, it's just a thought. And they pass. And I can prove that to you because you've had millions of thoughts, in your life. And a lot of them seemed really important at the time. And millions of those, and where'd they go? They're gone. They're not here. They're gone. They disappeared. You know, at some point they pass away. So there is a feeling that when a thought comes up, often it's like there's a permanency to it, and I have to deal with it if I have to engage with it. And if I don't, something bad will happen or it'll get worse or something. And the proof it the actual the fact is we don't have to. And again, I think it's two sides of the same coin. We can do that. I think it's worth doing that with positive thoughts too, or with certain kinds of positive thoughts, like yeah, I'm really good. I'm great. I'm really, that's that's fine. You feel that, or like I'm the best, man. I am so good at this. I am so amazed. That's fine. to have that thought, but you don't necessarily need to double down on it and make it central to your life. So I think just first recognizing that thoughts can pass. That's the whole concept with meditation too, which I think is another really good thing. It's sort of another thing like therapy, where people might think that's not for me, or that is for me, or that's not for me, or that's. But meditation is really working with thoughts and coming back to your body. And that's why this idea of, closing your eyes and focusing on your breath, your breathing, is very powerful. Focusing on your breathing is really interesting when you do it and you sort of mindfully take a couple of, deep, unimpeded breaths. Anytime I talk about it, I start doing it. I start like wanting to take a deep breath. And sometimes when you do, you realize, wow, I've been panting, I haven't really been breathing, been kind of going through life, you know, just like panting, hyperventilating or something. And the body has a relaxation response that feels good to just breathe. And the idea is like, people think that to do meditation well, you spending 20 to 30 minutes of just like not having any thoughts. That's not true at all. You have a million thoughts. But what you're practicing is letting the thought pass through and not seizing on it. It's sort of making your mind like a sieve and letting the thought kind of keep it moving, keep on going past. And you get better at that, you know. And that is a relief. We don't need to be a thinking machine, you know. Thinking is really overrated in a lot of areas of life. We have the most advanced brain of any creature on Earth, and we've accomplished incredible things as a species because of our thinking capacity. I mean, that's really all we have, right? I mean, it's in the natural world, we're pretty feeble, we're pretty weak, we're pretty slow. We don't have any natural weapons. We only became so successful because we're good thinkers. But so thinking is a great tool at survival. It's a great tool at building things, solving major problems. But I think the mistake that we make is that it's a good tool for well-being. I don't think it's nearly as good a tool for well-being. That we don't, I don't think we really think our way into health. I think that's again, more of a letting go and more of a changing behaviors and being more forgiving. Yeah, I think that we don't become our best, healthiest selves by figuring everything out, breaking the secret, and things like that.
I will agree. I think thinking is a beautiful thing and has gotten us quite the distance in this world, in this life, over the course of human history. But I think a lot of times we forget that we need the action as well. You can come up with a good game plan, but if you can't execute it, it's just a game plan, right? Let me ask you, Aaron, one final question before I let you go. I'm going to give you 3 wishes for this question. What are 3 things you wish about Sorry, what are the three things you wish people knew about creating behaviors that's going to take them from surviving to thriving in their life?
Three things about behavior to take them from surviving to thriving. Um, well, I think I think creating um, creating good habits, hygienic kind of good mental hygienic kind of physical hygienic habits, and sticking with them. I mean, I think that the example before of like taking a walk in the sunshine, getting natural sunlight in our eyes every day, um, simple behaviors like that, with repetition, and just sort of like trusting, identifying things that are good, that you believe are good, and then just doing the hell out of them is, and trusting that it will have a cumulative effect, can lead to great thriving. I think we interrupt that process a lot of times with self-doubt, like, how do I know what's good for me? You know, I mean, how do I know what are good habits? You do, because it's you, because it's your life, because it's your, because you know yourself. You know what's good for you and what's not. Um, and to allow yourself to identify that, and then to set a challenge to kind of do it regularly, and trust, have faith that it will lead in a good way. Because if you don't have faith or any trust, then you'll be like, I did what you said. I took a walk in the sunshine. I don't feel any different, And okay, well, is that a reason to go back to something that you know is bad? I mean, you're going to give that up because it didn't do something immediately. You need to have trust. So I would say developing healthy habits and sticking with them is a good way to behavioral